the Grand Mezquita of Cordoba, the Grand Mosque. We're also in the Cathedral of Cordoba. This is a mosque and cathedral. It just depends on when in history. Where we are in this magnificent and unique architecture stood before this mosque that you're seeing a church. The church was a Visigoth church when this part of the world, Iberia, was under the control of Visigoth Christian kings. In 711, the Arab invasions came. The Umayyad dynasty was the leading dynasty of the Arab world. It was the caliphate of the Umayyads ruling in Damascus from 660 AD, and the troops of both the Arabs and the Berbers of North Africa conquered Iberia progressively from 711 to 719. And they quickly established the magnificent and long-standing city of Cordoba as their new capital of the new Umayyad rule in this region. This was a turbulent period. Actually, in 750 AD, the Umayyads in Damascus were overtaken, conquered by a competing tribe, by the Abbasids, also a tribe with the roots, family roots with the Prophet Muhammad. And the Abbasids had their capital in Baghdad, in today's Iraq. Now, this means that the Arab rulers of Cordoba, who were rulers in the name of the Umayyad Caliphate, were in a very uncertain state. And indeed, there were Berbers, there were families from Yemen, there were families from throughout the Middle East, different tribes that were competing for power. And back in the east, Damascus was overrun and overthrown by the Abbasids. One prince of the Umayyad clan fled for his life, literally. A small group fled into the hills and were pursued by the Abbasids, who were absolutely determined to stamp out any Umayyad leadership, because the Abbasids would become the new caliphs of the Islamic world. Well, this young prince escaped into the hills. He was pursued. He crossed the rivers. He was in Mesopotamia, that is near today's Iraq. He fled, and he was pursued by the Abbasids. He fled across North Africa, but carrying a big family name, carrying the Umayyad family name. He was a prince of the Umayyad clan. He was Abd al-Rahman, and he arrived across the Strait of Gibraltar, and by virtue of his name and his standing as an Umayyad, and obviously his force of personality and some real luck, he was able to rally forces around him as he arrived almost by himself into the region of southern Iberia. Abd al-Rahman I declared himself emir and decided to build a mosque that would be appropriate for his new emirate. And it is said, of course this is 1250 years ago, that he bought out the church that was here so that he could own this property, and he began this mosque. And what he created is unique in the world. These beautiful pillars, these wonderful arches, of course, are structural, supporting the ceiling of the mosque, but they're also gorgeous and architecturally unique. And it is said that perhaps they reminded Abd al-Rahman of the palm trees of his native Damascus. Well, the emirate thrived and continued for another 150 years and more. The Abbasid Caliphate faced competition across the Islamic world. Other new caliphates declared themselves, such as the Fatimids in North Africa, and a descendant of Abd al-Rahman I, the founder of the emirate, had the courage and audacity to declare a caliphate of Cordoba. This was an Umayyad caliphate that began in the 10th century and in many ways was a golden age of Cordoba. The Grand Mosque, the Mezquita, was tremendously enlarged, and this magnificent structure was built. Now, what soon followed the caliphate, however, was what the Arab world calls the fitna. The fitna meaning the period of civil war. So in the beginning of the 11th century, there erupted within the Islamic world fights, especially within Iberia, and this large political entity broke up into independent city-states, as it were, called Taifa. And there was a Taifa of Seville, a Taifa of Cordoba, a Taifa of Granada, each one a kind of city-state. In the meantime, as the weakness of the Al-Andalus, of the Islamic Iberian political entities, increased, that weakness coming from the fighting within the Islamic world, the Christian conquests coming from the north, starting in Asturias, then Leon, then Castile, continued to come to the south. And it arrived in Cordoba with Ferdinand III in 1236. The Taif of Cordoba fell to the Catholic monarch. This became part of Leon and Castile. And when it fell, what happened to the mosque? Well, naturally, it became a church. At the beginning, not much changed. There were a few iconic signs of it being a church, figures of the cross, the figures of Christ, but the structures remained largely the same. In the ensuing decades, some chapels were added, but it was really in the 16th century that a major transformation took place. By the early 16th century, remember, Catholic Spain was not only a unified kingdom now under Christian rule, with the fall of the Taif of Granada in 1492, but Spain had become the center of world empire. And the Archbishop here in Cordoba thought something grander was needed than a mosque with a few bits of Christian iconography. And so he decided that he would build a cathedral within the mosque. It is said that the city council said, no, this is our grand mosque and an architectural treasure, but the Archbishop prevailed, and a cathedral is built in the heart of this mosque, a cathedral in Renaissance style with vaulting roofs and Christian frescoes and altarpieces that over the years became part of the Baroque architecture of Spanish Catholic rule. It is said, perhaps apocryphally, that when Charles V, the Emperor of the world, the king of Christian Spain, came here to see the new cathedral, he was not entirely pleased. And it is reported, perhaps apocryphally, that he said, "You have built something that could have been built anywhere, in a place that was only one place in the world, in this grand mosque. If it's true, it's a wonderful story. If it's not true, it almost deserves to be true, because what we have here is something that is unrivaled in its vision as a grand mosque. Of course, the traditions of churches to mosques, mosque to churches, became a part of a vast region. The most famous church of the ancient world, Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, became the Grand Mosque of Hagia Sophia after the conquests of the Ottomans in 1453. So what happened here is not unique. But what is remarkable is that this Mezquita cathedral remains today with the magnificence of the mosque, with the special features of the chapels and the grand altar of the cathedral inside. And now it is really a confluence of the two cultures. Pope John Paul II said in 1985 that it symbolizes the unity of two peoples of the monotheistic faiths. And in this way we can view it today. But it is absolutely a treasure, and a treasure that is enjoyed by worshipers and by tourists coming from all over the world.